After 10 years, Omnisphere 3 has finally arrived, and it is a universe of sound. But how does one go about reviewing a universe? Welcome. I'm Vulture Culture, and in this video I'm going to answer the question, is Omnisphere 3 worth that $500 price tag? The members of this channel and I have devised a rubric for stress testing synthesizers. Here's the format. 10 questions. I'll read each question aloud and give you my honest thoughts about whether or not I think Omnisphere 3 passes the test. And I'll play audio demos where applicable so you can decide for yourself. The final score is the total points out of 10. Let's begin. Test number 1, the Jean-Michel Jarre test. Does Omnisphere sound better and more emotive than any other software synthesizer on the planet? Omnisphere 3 has 18 brand new libraries with over 25,000 patches split between them, so there's no way I can even scratch the surface of how it sounds. However, here are some of my favorite patches I've discovered thus far. So of course, Omnisphere has always been the Rompler king. It's had the most sounds and the most interesting sounds because Spectrasonics got its start making sample CDs in the 90s. But it's a very capable virtual analog wavetable synthesizer as well. Where I thought Omnisphere 2 was starting to show its age was in the effects and with the filters. The filters don't sound bad, but Omnisphere 3 adds 36 brand new filters, which a lot of them are derived from vintage synthesizers like the Oberheim OB series and the Roland Jupiter series. And most importantly, they've component modeled the analog saturation when you really overdrive an analog filter. So there's a new level of realism there. And a lot of the effects were starting to get a little long in the tooth too. They were all the way from 2008, the original release of Omnisphere. And they didn't sound bad, they just didn't sound as like next gen and polished as some of the boutique effects pedals you can buy nowadays. But with 35 brand new effects that all sound world class, you can finally say that Omnisphere 3 is not just the world's best Rompler, but the world's best virtual analog and wavetable synthesizer. Test number 2, the John Hammond test. Has Omnisphere 3 brought innovation to the industry or moved synthesizer technology forward? There are many types of synthesis in Omnisphere here. We've got FM, ring modulation, but we have a brand new dual frequency shifter, which Spectrasonics is bragging is the world's first polyphonic pitch shifter. Let's initialize this patch. Let's pick a cool wavetable to work with, like Purity Bells. I'm just using this Prophet 12 as a hardware controller, by the way. Hardware integration now supports every major brand of synthesizer and MIDI controller, over 300 models. So I'm just using this for convenience, but all of these wavetables are in Omnisphere regardless of what hardware synths you might or might not have. Let's turn it on. I'm going to zero out the pan more or less so you can hear what both are doing. It gets really interesting when we put it into serial. So now A is feeding into B. And of course, just like everything else in Omnisphere, all of these faders are modulatable. So we just right click, go to modulate and modulate with an envelope. And you can see it's created this modulation routing from mod envelope 1 to the frequency of the first pitch shifter here. We can increase the source so it goes all the way. When you see a little red dot, that means that's maximum. Let's set that to mod envelope 3, which happens to be this one on the synthesizer. So I can set the time directly. And it's currently looping, which is interesting. Let's turn that off for now. We can make this tighter by grabbing, giving it more of a pluck. Really interesting sort of character to that. Let's bring the mix down and then modulate this. And we're going to use another envelope. We use mod envelope 4 this time. We can just hit this little magnifying glass to pull that up. And what I want to do is add some attack and some sustain to this. Turn looping off again. Let's increase the attack. Maybe not that far. Something like this. Turn legato off on both of these here. So now we have this sort of fifth portamento thing happening after the initial attack. Let's just add some reverb to that. Pretty interesting synthesis possibilities, and that's just with one oscillator. Same thing works with samples as well. I'm just going to add some attack here. Not using the filter, anything like that. So I think this one feature alone, if you ignore everything else new in Omnisphere 3, is enough to say it passes the John Hammond test. Test number 3, the training day test. Is Omnisphere 3 simple enough for a beginner to learn on? So let's say this is your first software synthesizer or first synthesizer in general. Omnisphere 3 makes it very simple to pick what you're looking for. So we've got all of our new libraries up here. Let's say we're looking for some sort of analog synth sound, right? So we can go to analog vibes, and then we can pick a category. Right now it's showing us all of the new patches, but it's much easier if we pick a category. Let's go to synths, let's go to synth brass, and then we can pick a patch here. Very quickly get a satisfying sound just like that. But what's more important is this new global page. So if you're brand new to synthesis, this is where you want to be, because we've got control over everything that we really care about, and it's right here on this front panel. And by the way, if you have a MIDI controller, it probably maps to these controls now. So you actually can have hands-on controls like you have a real hardware synthesizer. So it's the exact same thing. So we've got the filter cutoff here. We can control the amount of that envelope. We have control over the resonance. By the way, that resonance sounds really analog. But let's say that's somehow not beefy enough for you. We can also increase the unison. Turn that down, it's a little much for me. But let's say you're also getting into understanding attack, decay, sustain, release, or how we shape sounds. So if we look at the amplifier here, we can control the attack and turn this into more of a pad, right? And again, whether you're using a MIDI controller or a hardware synthesizer, when you move, say, the release for the filter, it just jumps there and then it'll jump back to the amplifier. So if we want to increase a lot of release there, bring the attack down a bit. Let's bring the sustain down a bit as well, and kind of that way it's little more movement in there. And we've done all of that, and then we put it into our track, and it's so huge that it's just dominating the mix. So we can also bring out a little bit of the lows and a little bit of the highs and get more of a mid-rangey sound. That way it fits in the mix a little bit better. Conversely, maybe we want a little smiley EQ action going on here. Let's pull the mids out. And that will work on every single patch in Omnisphere 3. So if you're a beginner, you really only need two things. This great patch browser, which allows you to quickly find the type of sound you're looking for. And then the global page makes it so easy to modify that sound in a meaningful way. And you don't have to get super deep into the modulation matrices and all of this stuff. You could just look at this global page and shape the sound how you want it. And you could spend a long time just mastering this section and it wouldn't be time wasted. So yes, in my opinion, Omnisphere 3 passes the test. It's the perfect synth for a beginner. Test number 4, the cipher test. Are there cheaper alternatives to Omnisphere 3 that sound just as good and offer the same functionality? Does the steak taste the same? Let's compare against Omnisphere's 3 biggest competitors. First up, Arturia's Pigment 6 is out now. You've got basically the same synthesis types as in Omnisphere. You've got virtual analog, wavetable, sample, granular. And then you even have a couple of types that aren't in Omnisphere. So you can do additive synthesis or physical modeling synthesis in Pigments. At $200, it is a bargain. And in a lot of ways, if you just can't do that $500 price tag on Omnisphere, I would say that Pigments is an acceptable alternative. Does it sound as good? Is there as much sample content? No way. It has 1,600 presets versus the 40,000 sounds in Omnisphere 3. But I think Pigments is really great. The one thing I would caution you is that if you think you're the type of person who would ever buy Omnisphere, I don't think you're going to go back to Pigments that often after you own Omnisphere. So that might be money wasted, maybe. At $250, you can get Serum 2, which has to be the most popular software synthesizer on the planet, making it the most popular synthesizer ever. Serum 2 is a sound design powerhouse. There's a reason it's so popular, and its interface is dead simple to get your head around. The effects in Serum are good. The filter sound is good. But the biggest thing about Serum 2 is that even though it now allows you to add your own samples, which is cool, it doesn't ship with very much factory content at all. So if you want to make one purchase and be able to do everything from orchestral to ethnic music to vintage analog synthesizer samples, that's going to be much more in the Omnisphere 3 category. And if you just want to do wavetable virtual analog stuff, Serum's the right synth for you. UVI Falcon is probably the closest contender to something like Omnisphere 3, and it's $300 compared to, I'm actually seeing $479 is the price I'm seeing for Omnisphere 3 right now for pre-order. So $180 off, yeah, I mean, that's a lot of money, and I do think Falcon 3 is amazing. I mean, it is an incredible synthesizer. I don't think the UI is anywhere near as simple and easy to use as Omnisphere's. Everything in Omnisphere is just simple and powerful. It's very easy to get a lot done fast. And of course, there's no competing with the sample content in Omnisphere 3. Everything from custom-built instruments to things like setting pianos on fire and recording that sound. I know in Omnisphere 2, they sampled radioactive caves. The psychoacoustic sound sources in Omnisphere have always been my favorite, and is that unique Spectrasonic signature to them. And by the way, you do get all of those 90s sample CDs built into Omnisphere as well. Again, UVI Falcon has something like 1,600 presets, which is a lot of presets presets, by the way, but that's nothing compared to what's going on with Omnisphere. So I could see people saying that it should fail the cipher test. I mean, Pigments is great, and it's less than half the price. Here's what I would say, though. Does Pigments replicate the totality of what it's like to interact with and hear Omnisphere 3? No, not at all. It's a great synthesizer. I own it. I like it. But I will have to be honest with you guys. I never really use it because I do have Omnisphere. And there are a couple of things that Pigments can do that Omnisphere can't yet. But I think that really when you're going for this just incredible library of the best sounds you've ever heard and the ability to create your own sounds so fast and so powerfully, it's Omnisphere every time. Serum, I think, is a great wavetable synthesizer, but it's not really a contender for Omnisphere. And UVI Falcon is also a phenomenal product. I don't think I would recommend someone to save $179 buying Falcon when really, if you could just save up that little bit of extra money, I think the difference in price is worth it with Omnisphere. Test number 5, the Dale Cooper test. Does Omnisphere come with a suite of world-class effects that can take you to places both wonderful and strange? So like I said earlier, Omnisphere 3 comes with 35 brand new next generation effects. And what's amazing is they actually went back and remastered all of the classic patches from back in the day, all of those Omnisphere 1 and 2 patches you loved. So for instance, I love the patch Luminosonic Light Bulbs, and I'm just going to type this in here. And you can see here's the original patch. If we look at the effects, we've got Proverb, which sounds great, but you know, it's their old school 2008 reverb effect. And then we've got Luminosonic Light Bulbs Shimmer. So this version uses the new shimmer reverb. So let's bring in some of that. Yeah. Angelic. But let's initialize a patch and we can just make ourselves a quick little pluck sound. There we go. And we'll jump into the effects here and check out some of the new stuff they have. First off, let's look at the color. And we've got analog studio tape and console, a vintage enhancer, tube saturator, noisemaker. Let's check out what the studio tape sounds like. So here's the sound without it. Pretty static, and with it, you can hear a little bit of that dolphining. Really give it that sound. And if we go to the page 2, we can actually pick which mixing console we're checking out here. So like probably an SSL 4000, I'm guessing. And we can put a mic pre on it. Get a little bit of that flavor. Let's see, vintage enhancer. I haven't checked any of these out yet either. Oh, so this is A-type. So this is like a Dolby A-type thing. So what that's doing is companding and expanding the signal, I believe, and boosting that high end. Comes from an old piece of gear that actually John Lennon used on his vocals to give it a little bit more of a brighter, airier quality. Then of course we have like distortion. So let's get in here. Mean Machine. Perfect. Tube overdrive. Well, that sounds pretty good. We bring in another oscillator, right? We have different types here. Really nasty sort of sound. In fact, I just realized in the new hardware integration model for the Prophet 12 that it's the distortion you get when you instantiate the built-in effects of the Prophet 12. Really nasty. nasty. So let's drag that back up to the top there. Let's go into the modulation and see what's new here. Unstable drifter. It's just like me when I crash out. Incredible noise in there and everything. Oh, and they even have a Juno model, which of course I'm a big fan of the Juno series back there. Oh, and it does sound like that. When you plug a Juno in, there's like a whoosh that goes from left to right with those old Bucket Brigade delay chips. It's a little much, although it is on the Juno 6 as well. Let's just bring in a little bit of that. Okay, let's keep going. So we have a bunch of new delays, like Swiss Army delay. So this is like a Bucket Brigade delay. Based off of the look of the knobs, I'm pretty sure it's based off of this vintage DM2 or DM3 Boss Bucket Brigade delay pedal, which has this sort of grimy character to it. We have backward echo, which is super interesting. And we can sync that whether we want it to be synced to time or we can have it in milliseconds. Let's go with 8th D. Love good 8th D. And then in reverb, we have a bunch of new ones. We've already checked out the shimmer verb, which is now built in. You don't need a sonic extension for it. What could inversions be? Let's turn the backwards echoes off real quick. That's a fascinating reverb tail. Let's check out the velvet verb. Oh, this almost looks like a Model 200. Really has that like late 70s reverb sound, that dense, dark, heavily modulated, low DAC type sound. I'm going to be using that all the time. Looking at the types here, yeah, it looks like they modeled this probably off of a vintage Lexicon would be my guess, because they have these same presets. Hall 2, that's the one that Vangelis used, by the way. So does Omnisphere 3 come with a world-class suite of effects that will take you someplace wonderful and strange? Absolutely. That's a point. Test number 6, the Nostromo test. How difficult is it for you to program your own patches in Omnisphere 3? Does it require labyrinthine menu diving? I don't think it could really be easier, so we could pick a sample here. And again, we've just got this wonderful browser here, and we can even pick by things like mood. Like, let's go with dreamlike here. And we can just pick whatever calls our name. Let's go with like Heartland here. One thing about the design philosophy of Omnisphere is you can actually do virtually everything you want to do on this one page, except for effects and I guess arpeggiation basically. But unlike other synthesizers where you're sort of like, if you want to do modulation, you have to dive in here or you have to dive in. Everything's right here. So let's add some attack and release. Let's turn the filter on and pick one of the new filters. Let's go with the Oberheim 2-pole. Remove the attack. Slow down the decay and the release a bit here. Add some key tracking. So one of the cool things in Omnisphere 3 is they've added component modeled analog saturation of the filter. We'll cover that more later, but let's just add some in now. Maybe not quite so much. Okay, that's fine, but I want some more movement in the sound. Let's modulate the filter. So let's just right click on the cutoff, go to modulate, modulate with LFO, and it automatically routes to LFO 1, and we can hear that. We can tame that here. And again, we haven't left this front page. And we can even control the depth and delay if we want to add some delay into that. So it sounds good, but it's a little thin. So let's bring in another oscillator. And we can pick one of an innumerable number of waves here. But let's just make it simple and go for a sine wave. We have our 4 volume controls here, so we can bring that back. Okay, sounds good. Little boring, so let's add some FM to that. We can just turn it on here. We don't actually even have to go into the FM page. There's a usable setting. To my ear, that sounds a lot better, a lot throatier. Let's add some ring modulation as well. Cool, it's a little much, so let's turn that off and just turn unison on instead. So without leaving this page, and then let's go back to Heartland and let's just turn the granular engine on. Now, finally, if we want to, we can actually jump in here and get some control over what we're listening to. So yeah, in my opinion, for what you're able to do, this is absolutely the easiest synth to program in the entire world. Test number 7, the Deep Space Nine test. Does Omnisphere 3 offer deep modulation possibilities that will surprise even the greatest sound designers in the world? Okay, so this is probably the easiest test to pass. Everybody knows Omnisphere is a modulation powerhouse, but I'll demonstrate one thing for you guys, which is the new quad zone feature. So I've picked 4 samples, somewhat at random. And then if I go into quad zone here, you can see the zones I've created. And then I've just mapped that to this ribbon controller here. So if we go back, you can see this first sample is a coil pickup on a laptop. Not anybody's most inspiring sound, but then we can begin to morph it. And that's all happening in quad zone. You could do this with notes so that you could be controlling different stuff. This is sort of like your standard splits type thing, but you could also use velocity. And of course, this fader, just like everything else in Omnisphere, can be modulated by things like LFOs, aftertouch, all sorts of really interesting things. Test number 8, the Aliens from Signs test. Does Omnisphere 3 avoid any major design flaws or missing key features? Is it free of an Achilles heel? So like I said earlier, there are a couple of types of synthesis that aren't in Omnisphere 3 currently. However, I think Spectrasonics doesn't like to do anything unless they can rock the industry with it. So I think that unlike other companies that kind of have like a throw everything in the kitchen sink sort of attitude as far as designing their plugins, Omnisphere has a considerable level of restraint, actually. And do I think not having an additive or physical modeling engine means Omnisphere doesn't feel complete? Not at all. I don't even use what's in Omnisphere like 99% of it most of the time, and I just don't think it needs more. If anything, the story of Spectrasonics the past few years has been figuring out really cool ways to make it easier to access everything in Omnisphere, like the custom UIs in the Sonic extensions. I will say one thing I noticed I still can't do in Omnisphere 3 is use a oscillator as a modulation source to do things like filter FM that I can even do on some of the vintage synths behind me. So consider that a feature request. That would be something I'd like to see in the future or something like that. But does it get the point? Absolutely. Test number 9, the Voight Kampf test. Does Omnisphere 3 sound more analog than analog? Does it capture the warmth, drift, and glow of vintage synthesizers? Okay, let's check out some of the new analog emulation features in Omnisphere 3. We'll start with just a sawtooth wave, and you'll see here that drift is a new feature. It's like the drift function that used to hang out in the unison page. It's still there, by the way. We have scatter now, too. But we now have it on all of our virtual analog oscillators. So if I play a power chord, it's kind of what you would expect. But if I bring it up a lot, you can see we could basically break the synthesizer. Somewhere around here, it sounds really good. And that applies to all the oscillators. So if I bring in this sawtooth wave, you can see it sounds really lush. So why don't we go ahead and add just like a little bit of release to that and see how this sounds. Let's do just even a little bit more, right? Let's put a little bit. It's too much. Really lush, and we haven't detuned the oscillators at all. We're just using oscillator drift as a way to get that really lush vintage tone. Now let's check out the filters. So we have some new filters, 36 I believe, and we've got classic beefy French. I want to jump in and check out the Jupiter low pass filter. So let's check that out and see how this sounds. Pretty fat, right? Let's go ahead and increase some resonance here. I'm gonna just kill the attack there. And immediately you could hear that these filters sound very realistic. You know, I have a couple of synthesizers like the Roland JX3P and the Juno 6 behind me that have the IR3109 filter chip from the Jupiter 8. So I know what that sounds like. The really big thing that they've added that excites me in Omnisphere 3 is this saturation fader right here. So the secret, I would say, behind vintage synth tone a lot of the times, not even just analog tone, because there's modern analog synths that don't have it. And what it is like really hot oscillators. For some reason back in the day, they were like slamming those oscillators into the filter. Nowadays, manufacturers like to play it a little safe, a little bit more vanilla. So let's increase this and you'll see how quickly we get that magic. All of a sudden, it sounds like a vintage synth. It has that flavor. It's amazing how much it tames that resonant peak. To get that same sound, we need to increase it further. Really nasty and saturated, just like a vintage synth. Really incredible new feature that they've added here. And finally, test number 10, the Highlander test. If there could only be one software synthesizer you own, is Omnisphere 3 the right choice? Does it justify its $479 price tag? I think the fear with plugins is that all of our hard drives are riddled with them. They're like a transmitted disease. There's so many of them out there, and a lot of them are really great, but if you're like me, probably more of your plugins have been collecting virtual dust than not. Here's another thing. Compared to some other companies that I won't name, like Native Instruments, Omnisphere's last paid version came out 10 years ago. And 12 years before that was the first version. You guys all know like plugin companies that they put out like a new version every year and a half, and like they didn't really change that much. The UI looks a little bit different, and they added like exactly one new feature. Spectrasonics is the opposite of that. And another incredible thing is Spectrasonics' first virtual product, Atmosphere, came out almost 25 years ago. It's almost a vintage synthesizer at this point. And they are offering discounts. So if you bought Atmosphere almost 25 years ago, you get a special price for upgrading to Omnisphere 3. There is no other company in the world like that. The price of Omnisphere has always been high. They never run sales on it. But the thing is, you'll never really have to buy another plugin again. Just think about that. Think of the amount of money you've likely spent on plugins. And then think if you could save all of that and just make this one purchase. Now, for some people, that much money is just out of the question, and I understand that. It doesn't mean you'll never buy another synth plugin again, but what it means is you're free of the FOMO, because Omnisphere 3 does everything. It's really got that final girl energy. And full disclosure here, Spectrasonics was kind enough to allow me to upgrade my version of Omnisphere to 3 for free. However, I did pay $500 for Omnisphere 2, and I don't regret it at all. I have used it more than any other plugin. There's no doubt in my mind. I love the magic of vintage synthesizers. I love going back into the studio and playing with all the knobs and faders. But Omnisphere can create some sounds that are truly gorgeous that aren't just echoes of the past. There's a certain flavor Spectrasonics has always had, a nostalgic, organic, real feel to the sound that you can't put a price on. And so for me, it is absolutely a point. It's the most emphatic point I'm going to score, in fact. Omnisphere 3 is an entire universe of sound. It's expensive, but its value is unparalleled in every way. So for me, Omnisphere is a 10 out of 10. But what do you think? Please let me know what your score is in the comments down below. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. There's going to be a lot more Omnisphere 3 content coming from me in the next few days, so if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. So on the screen in front of you, you should see a live stream where I'm diving deep into making your own sounds with Omnisphere. And if you like this video and you want to see more videos like it, the community and I have actually done many rubric-based streams where we run classic and vintage synthesizers through what we call the legendary synthesizer test.